We exist in a time when the world is at our fingertips. Knowledge, amusement, and community are all instantly accessible. Never before have we had such an abundance of tools, choices, and diversions. Yet, in a great contradiction, we've never felt so devoid of drive. This expanding indifference, impacting countless individuals globally, is commonly misdiagnosed as idleness, a failure of self-control, or a character flaw. Yet, could this assessment be mistaken? Could the issue be not a deficit of motivation, but a surplus of stimulation that smothers all potential for authentic self-awareness? This is the very proposition put forth by numerous modern thinkers, an idea that aligns profoundly with the insights of Viktor Frankl. As an Austrian psychiatrist who endured the Nazi concentration camps, Frankl saw his family murdered at Auschwitz and spent years contending with death, starvation, and cruelty. Despite this, he was able to uncover an inner resilience that was not born from enjoyment or the prospect of liberation, but from a far more profound source: meaning. For Frankl, humans are propelled first and foremost by a will to meaning. It isn't the quest for comfort, enjoyment, or achievement that sustains us, but rather the capacity to assign significance to our lives, even and especially in the most dire of situations. This concept casts a troubling light upon the reality we confront today. If true motivation stems from meaning, what is the result when a whole society is engineered to pursue only gratification and distraction? What becomes of the human spirit when every dull moment is filled with a short video? Every lull is seized by a notification. Every quiet moment is overcome by external noise. This video offers a fundamental re-examination. It's possible you are not unmotivated. It's possible you are simply depleted. Depleted from pursuing ambitions that are not your own. From ingesting content that offers no substance, from existing in a perpetual state of distraction. In this light, a lack of motivation is not a failing. It is a symptom. It is a signal that something far more vital has been lost in the noise. And this is precisely our topic of exploration. How today's hyperstimulation is chipping away at our capacity to find purpose. How quiet, emptiness, and discomfort, now avoided like the plague, are actually the very avenues to rediscovering our true selves, and how the wisdom of a man who survived the inferno of history can still be our compass in the technological and existential chaos of our time. If you have ever felt adrift, depleted, and incapable of action despite knowing what you must do, this video is meant for you. Because it may be that your spirit is not broken. It may just be trying to signal that it's time to find your way back to yourself. The human brain was never built to handle the ceaseless barrage of stimuli that characterizes contemporary existence. Through millennia of evolution, our minds adapted to natural rhythms of exertion and repose, concentration and diversion, engagement and introspection. But in the last few decades, a radical shift has occurred. We have stepped into an age of hyperstimulation, where each quiet second is consumed by alerts, luminous screens, synthetic sounds, and a cascade of information, all vying for our attention. What was once seen as downtime, moments for reflection, for feeling, for simply being, is now branded as squandered time. Technology, rather than serving as an ally to consciousness, has frequently turned into a sedative for the spirit. We browse through infinite feeds, not because the content matters, but because we can no longer tolerate silence. We marathon TV shows, watch fleeting videos, and absorb news at a breakneck speed, not for knowledge or growth, but for escape. Escape from whom? From ourselves. This pattern carries deep consequences. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter linked to motivation and reward, is perpetually triggered by minor jolts of digital engagement. However, these jolts are superficial and synthetic. The more we subject ourselves to them, the more desensitized we become to life's organic stimuli. What once thrilled us, a deep conversation, a passion project, a peaceful stroll, starts to feel bland. Our brains, hooked on novelty and speed, Forget how to appreciate what is profound, unhurried, and meaningful. This is the hidden source of modern-day demotivation. Effortless pleasure is the enemy of authentic drive. When every small chance for a pause is filled with a digital prize, we forfeit the capacity to desire anything deeply. It's not that you lack the will to transform your life. It's that your internal reward system has been commandeered by stimuli that only imitate a sense of accomplishment. This brings us to an even more disquieting thought. If we are so occupied with escaping boredom, are we not also escaping the questions that truly define us? For it is in the quiet, in the absence of external input, that the profound questions of our existence surface. As Viktor Frankl warned, commenting on human suffering and modern existential angst, modern man has progressively less time for reflection, less nerve to make choices, and less liberty to discover his own meaning. Yet, it is exactly this ability to find a personal meaning that upholds his dignity as a human being. In the following section, we will explore the ramifications of this mental exhaustion brought on by overstimulation. Why are our minds so depleted, and what is lost when we lose the ability to reflect? If this message is speaking to you, please click the subscribe button and join the channel. Thank you for your support. What becomes of a mind that is never at rest, that is never quiet, that is never permitted to just be without a stimulus, an expectation, a distraction? The answer is straightforward yet calamitous. It shatters. The overtaxed mind doesn't think. It simply reacts. It doesn't ponder. It consumes. And over time, this mind forfeits its most valuable asset, the capacity for reflection. To reflect is more than to think. It is to take a step back and observe. It is to let thoughts find their place, emotions to solidify, and values to emerge. It is within this internal sanctuary of quiet and processing that we construct our identities, make sense of our experiences, and connect with what is truly important. But when every fraction of a second is filled by a new stimulus, this space gets worn away. In its stead, a restless, anxious mind arises, incapable of holding on to a deeper train of thought, much less pursuing an existential quest for purpose. The weary mind craves relief, not insight, and therein lies the peril. Because a mind that only desires relief will grow dependent on anything that offers a swift getaway. Social media, food, pornography, consumption, even obsessive productivity, anything to divert from the immediate unease, even at the expense of long-term health. This is the snare. Excessive stimulation keeps us from thinking deeply, and the lack of deep thought dooms us to repeat the same meaningless cycles day in and day out. Furthermore, the depleted mind is one that loses connection with itself. Without periods of introspection, we fail to recognize our genuine feelings. We don't know our own desires. We can't pinpoint what truly inspires us. We are left at the mercy of external cues, living by what is recommended, advertised, or demanded of us, instead of what arises from within. The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard remarked that the ultimate form of despair is to choose to be someone other than oneself. But how can we choose to be ourselves if we never take the time to find ourselves? The mind that doesn't reflect is a mind estranged from its own core. And it is this very state of estrangement that feeds what we label as demotivation. Because when we aren't in touch with our emotions, our principles, and our most authentic aspirations, every action feels contrived and artificial. Motivation doesn't appear from a vacuum. It is the result of inner alignment. And this alignment demands quiet. It demands room. It demands a pause. As Viktor Frankl declared, between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. But what occurs when that space is obliterated? When the interval between stimulus and response no longer exists? When there is no longer a choice, but only an automatic reaction? In the next segment, we will examine this outcome more closely. How demotivation in this overstimulated age is not a marker of personal failure, but the stifled cry of a soul longing for meaning. It's frequent to hear sentiments like, "I feel paralyzed. I can't get anything done. It's like something is draining me from within." These are not mere complaints. They are diagnoses. In a world fixated on productivity, performance, and peak achievement, feeling unmotivated is seen as a personal defect, as if the individual is flawed, as if they are missing some essential component. But what if the reverse is true? What if this listlessness is really a sign of a dysfunctional system, of a spirit being choked by shallowness? In this framework, demotivation isn't a weakness. It is a rebellion. It is the suppressed scream of a psyche that can no longer pursue hollow objectives, imposed benchmarks, and stimuli that offer happiness, but only leave behind a void. It is the quiet implosion of someone who has spent too much time living outwardly without ever glancing inward. It isn't that you lack the desire to act. It's that you are weary of acting without a purpose. It isn't a lack of strength. It's that you have already depleted your reserves trying to fit into a life that doesn't truly belong to you. The symptom of demotivation uncovers a difficult truth. We are attempting to impose motion where meaning is absent. We are trying to reignite a fire with the wrong kind of fuel, and the soul is aware. It can sense when something is superficial. When there is no authenticity, when we are simply performing a part, that is when paralysis sets in, not from incapability, but from being disconnected from our true drivers. Picture a plant set in barren soil, subjected to artificial light 24/7. Can it thrive? Perhaps. But it will be frail, discolored, and detached from its inherent cycle. The same happens to the human mind when it lives submerged in perpetual stimulation and relentless demands, with no opportunity to put down roots into its own essence. Demotivation, in this context, is the body signaling that we must halt. It is the soul signaling that we need to return to ourselves. Frankl had already warned of this with remarkable accuracy. When an individual cannot find a profound sense of purpose in life, they divert themselves with pleasures. But diversion is not fulfillment. And when the emptiness reemerges, as it invariably does, we see that the issue was never a lack of motion, but a lack of direction. What we require is not greater productivity, but deeper reconnection. And this leads us to the profound wisdom of Viktor Frankl, who endured the hell of the concentration camps to impart something many of us forget. Genuine motivation is not born from comfort, but from purpose. In the next section, we will plunge into the core of his philosophy to grasp why the search for meaning is the only real solution to the existential void of our times. If this message is speaking to you, then my ebooks will provide immense value. Beyond the Shadow deciphers the essential concepts of Jung, and Dialogues with the Unconscious offers a 30-day framework to integrate them into your own life. You can find both in the pinned comment. In one of humanity's bleakest chapters, Viktor Frankl survived the atrocities of Auschwitz, Dachau, and other Nazi camps. He saw the absolute worst of mankind. He watched people lose everything: family, honor, identity. He saw bodies turned into numbers and lives whittled down to mere existence. And even in that place, amid starvation, agony, and death, he noticed something astonishing. Some individuals held on to the flame of life, not because they were more physically robust or more fortunate, but for a much more fundamental reason. They still possessed a why. Frankl observed that those who held a clear purpose, something or someone to live for, a mission larger than themselves, were the ones who staved off psychological collapse. He termed this the will to meaning and centered his psychotherapeutic method, logotherapy, around this concept. For Frankl, human beings are not driven by a pursuit of pleasure, as Freud believed, nor by a pursuit of power, as Adler proposed. The most fundamental drive in human beings is to find meaning in their lives. When this meaning is absent, an existential vacuum appears, the very same vacuum we now mask with distractions, toxic productivity, and ceaseless stimulation. The most staggering part of Frankl's work is the discovery that meaning can be located even in suffering. Even amidst extreme anguish, there is potential for dignity, choice, and transcendence. Life never ceases to have meaning, he wrote, even in the face of unavoidable suffering. This idea completely upends the modern notion that we must feel good to be productive, that we must be motivated before we can act. Frankl flips this logic. It is often through acting with purpose that we regain our strength. Purpose is not an indulgence. It is a fundamental psychological necessity. This realization transforms everything. If motivation hinges on meaning, then its absence isn't an indicator of weakness, but of a disconnect from what is truly significant. And this disconnection is amplified when we live for hollow goals, status, social approval, metrics, and outward appearances. Frankl challenges us to pose a different question. What is the purpose of my life? Not, how can I get more energy? But why is it worth rising from bed? Not, how can I be more productive? But what is it that truly drives me? In his own words, man is capable of enduring any how as long as he has a why. And this why does not have to be grandiose. It could be a child, a personal cause, a guiding principle, or even a simple duty, provided it is lived with sincerity. The critical element is that it is authentic, that it originates from within, and that it links you to something beyond the urgency of the present moment. But how can we unearth this meaning in a life saturated with noise, diversions, and demands? How do we create the space for this reconnection to occur? In the upcoming section, we will delve into precisely that, the power of silence, pauses, and discomfort as portals to a life of greater purpose and presence. In a culture where a lack of stimulation is nearly perceived as a danger, discussing silence seems radical. Silence makes us face ourselves. It compels us to hear what we've been trying to ignore. Our most turbulent thoughts, our deepest suppressed pains, our most difficult questions. And still, it is in this seemingly unwelcoming domain that the solution to reconnecting with what truly matters is found. The modern individual has been trained to be afraid of emptiness. They cannot endure waiting, cannot bear being alone, and do not know how to simply exist. But this void, this space not occupied by stimuli, is not a design flaw. It is a beckoning, an invitation to halt, to witness, to recalibrate. Because only when the external racket stops can we begin to hear the voice of our conscience. Only when the excess fades away can the essential come into view. Frankl stated that life asks something of each of us, but to give an answer we must first listen, and listening, in this oversaturated world, has become a lost skill. We are so conditioned to the nonstop stream of data, viewpoints, and outside expectations that we have lost the ability to hear our own inner calling. This calling is neither loud nor dramatic. It is subtle, a whisper in the space between one thought and the next. And it can only be perceived when we make room for silence, powering down the phone, declining one more task, saying no to what is not vital. These actions might feel strange at first, but this unease is a sign that you are breaking free from autopilot. It is a precursor to clarity, because silence precedes motivation. Honest listening precedes aligned action, and confronting what you have been avoiding precedes purpose. And indeed, silence can be unsettling. It can bring insecurities, doubts, and old hurts to the surface. But it can also uncover forgotten values, genuine aspirations, and new paths forward. The discomfort we experience in the absence of stimulation is not the adversary. It is the start of the process of becoming whole again. It is in this space that the soul, previously muffled by the clamor and rush, starts to murmur truths we have long ignored. As Viktor Frankl penned, each of us has to find in his own life a unique meaning, a mission that is his. No life can be replaced, No destiny can be repeated. Each one is irreplaceable. But how are we to hear this mission? How can we recognize this call if we never pause to listen? In the next and final segment, we will tackle the most crucial step: how to convert this silence into purposeful action. How to rise from apathy not with external stimulation, but through the authentic expression of an inner purpose. Because real motivation begins when we cease our flight and finally resolve to live with intention. There arrives a point where you cannot continue living on autopilot. A point where the void becomes louder than any distraction. Where weariness cannot be soothed by one more video, one more scroll, one more duty. This is the breaking point. And ironically, it is also the beginning. Because it is when we stop looking outside for what can only be discovered inside that we at last start moving in the proper direction. Authentic motivation is not boisterous. It does not arrive with easy assurances or prepackaged solutions. It does not stem from the need to satisfy others, to achieve external benchmarks, or to conform to imposed norms. It materializes when you connect with what is non-negotiable within you, with your core values, your buried dreams, your most honest truth. It is a quiet yet unwavering power, a spark that, once lit, fundamentally alters how you engage with the world. And this doesn't call for heroism. It doesn't require grand acts or sweeping transformations. It begins with the simple things, with silencing the noise, with an honest self-assessment, with the small act of declaring, "This no longer works for me." It begins with the decision to move against the chaos, to cease the frantic scramble in every direction and start a journey inward, because it is in this internal realm that purpose materializes. It is there that you start to act not from a sense of duty, but from a sense of meaning. Not from impulse, but from choice. Not to run away, but to express the person you truly are. Demotivation is not a defect. It is an invitation, a summons to stop skimming the surface of life and to delve into what is real. A signal that it's time to reconnect, to welcome silence, to reclaim your own presence, and to act with intention. Viktor Frankl survived hell and came out of it with a profound truth. Everything can be taken from a man except one thing, the last of the human freedoms. To choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. You still possess that freedom, even at this very moment, and you can wield it to break the cycle of superficiality and start writing a new story. A story where you are no longer swayed by stimuli, but directed by purpose. If this message resonated with you, share in the comments what you will begin to leave behind today. What noise will you turn down to hear your own voice? And if this was meaningful to you, continue watching. The next video is also significant. It might be precisely what you need to hear at this moment. Because the journey to a meaningful life does not conclude here. It is only just beginning.